What if the one person your brother trusted to have his back wasn't there? What if, in the most brutal moment of his career, Jey Uso was left completely alone and the man standing over him wasn't a rival, wasn't a stranger, but Drew McIntyre, a man with cold eyes and absolutely zero remorse? And what if, somewhere backstage, Jimmy Uso watched every single second of it happen on a monitor and couldn't do a single thing to stop it? Welcome back to Wrestling Impact. I'm your host, and tonight we are diving deep into one of the most emotionally charged, gut-wrenching moments to hit Smackdown in recent memory. If you haven't seen it yet, strap in, because by the time we're done here, you are going to feel everything. And if you have seen it, you already know why you clicked on this video. Because what Drew McIntyre did to Jey Uso on SmackDown wasn't just an attack. It was a statement, a declaration. And Jimmy Uso's reaction? That might just be the most important piece of this whole story. Let's go. To understand why this moment hit so differently, you have to understand who Jey Uso is right now in professional wrestling. We're not talking about the Jey Uso of 3 years ago, the tag team specialist, the man who lived in Roman Reigns' shadow inside the Bloodline. We're talking about the Jey Uso who found his own voice. The Jey Uso who the crowd goes absolutely electric for every single time that music hits. Yeet. It's not just a catchphrase anymore. It's a battle cry. It's a statement of identity. When Jey Uso walks through that curtain, the energy in that arena shifts. People feel it in their chest. And that's what makes seeing him laid out, motionless, helpless, that's what makes it feel like a punch to the stomach for every single fan watching. And Drew McIntyre knew exactly what he was doing. Drew McIntyre right now is not the lovable Scotsman who came back to WWE and won the championship at WrestleMania. That version of Drew feels like a lifetime ago. The Drew McIntyre walking around SmackDown these days is something colder, something meaner, something more calculated. There's a darkness behind those eyes that goes beyond heel tactics or cheap shots. This is a man who has decided that the ends justify every single means. And if that means making an example out of Jey Uso in front of the entire SmackDown audience, in front of the world, then so be it. And that's exactly what he did. The moment started, as so many great wrestling moments do, with a sense of false security. SmackDown had been building to a confrontation between Jey and Drew for weeks, verbal exchanges, near misses, the kind of tension that makes you grip the edge of your seat every time they're both in the same building. But on this night, things felt different. There was a calm before the storm. Jey came out. The crowd was on fire, and for a few minutes it looked like it was going to be a great night for the main event Jey Uso. The people were behind him. The energy was undeniable. And then Drew McIntyre's music hit. Now here's the thing about Drew's entrance. When that music plays and that man walks out with that sword, with that intensity radiating off of him like heat from an open flame, even the most confident wrestlers in that locker room feel something. It's involuntary. It's primal. And Jey Uso, to his credit, didn't back down. He stood his ground. He met Drew's stare from across that ring with the kind of defiance that only comes from someone who truly believes in themselves. And the crowd erupted. Because that's what they love about Jey. He never backs down. Never. Not from Roman Reigns. Not from anyone. But Drew McIntyre wasn't there to trade stares. He wasn't there to talk. He wasn't there to play games. He was there to send a message. And the message came fast. It happened so quickly that even the camera almost couldn't keep up. Drew slid into the ring with the speed and ferocity of a man who had been waiting for this exact moment, and before Jey could fully set himself, Drew was already on him. A massive Claymore attempt Jey ducked, showed incredible ring awareness, and you could hear the collective gasp from the crowd shift into a roar of relief. For one split second, it looked like Jey might have the upper hand. It looked like he might be able to turn the tide. One split second. Drew recovered with the kind of athleticism that, even after everything you've seen from him, still catches you off guard. He's 6'5", he moves like someone half his size, and when he's locked in, genuinely locked in, he is one of the most physically imposing forces in professional wrestling today. He grabbed Jey, threw him into the corner with authority, and the attack that followed was relentless. It wasn't just a beating, it was systematic. It was deliberate. Drew McIntyre was taking Jey Uso apart piece by piece, and he was doing it slowly enough that everyone, the fans, the announce team, the people watching at home, felt every single second of it. The referee tried to intervene. Drew looked at him with that cold, dead-eyed stare that says, "Move, or you're next," and the referee moved. Because that's what you do when Drew McIntyre looks at you like that. By the time it was over, Jey Uso was on the mat. Not just down, The kind of down where the crowd goes silent because they're not sure if this is part of the show or something else entirely. Trainers were at ringside. The announce team dropped their voices. And Drew McIntyre stood over Jey Uso, looked out at that crowd, the same crowd that had been chanting Yeet just minutes earlier, and smiled. That smile. That is what will haunt people's nightmares. Now. Let's talk about Jimmy Uso. Because while all of this was happening in that ring, Jimmy was backstage. And we need to paint this picture properly, because this is where the emotional weight of this entire story comes crashing down. Jimmy Uso has had his own complicated journey. He's been through the war inside the Bloodline. He's been through the heartbreak of betrayal, the chaos of loyalty tested to its absolute limits. He and G have rebuilt their relationship from the ground up as brothers, as partners, as the Usos, the greatest tag team of their generation. When those two are in a good place, when that brotherhood is solid, there is nothing more powerful in all of professional wrestling. So imagine, just imagine, you're Jimmy Uso. You're backstage. Maybe you're lacing up your boots. Maybe you're watching a monitor with some of the other guys. And then you see it. You see your brother, your twin brother, the other half of you, getting destroyed in that ring by Drew McIntyre. And you can't get there in time. Maybe you're not scheduled. Maybe someone's physically blocking your path. Maybe by the time you burst through that curtain, it's already over. And all you can do is stand there and look at what's left. The look on Jimmy's face when he got to that ring, and I want you to really sit with this, was not the look of a wrestler responding to a wrestling angle. This was raw. This was real, in the way that the best professional wrestling always blurs that line between performance and genuine human emotion. Jimmy Uso looked at his brother on that mat, and you could see it written all over him: the guilt, the rage, the helplessness, the desperate need to do something, anything, and the terrifying realization that there was nothing left to do in that moment except be there. He cradled his brother's head. He waved frantically for medical staff. He looked up at the entrance ramp where Drew McIntyre had already disappeared, and the look in Jimmy's eyes in that moment was not a character choice. That was a man who loves his brother, and who just watched something awful happen, and who is now carrying the full weight of what comes next. Folks, that is wrestling at its absolute highest level. That is why we watch. That is why we care. Now, in the aftermath, the reaction from Jimmy. Because we got words. We got Jimmy Uso speaking on what happened, and I'm going to break this down because every single word matters. Jimmy made it crystal clear that what Drew McIntyre did was not a competitive action. This wasn't a rivalry tactic. This wasn't Smackdown chess. This was an ambush. This was cowardice wearing the mask of aggression. And Jimmy Uso, a man who knows something about walking morally complicated paths in professional wrestling, called it exactly what it was. He said, in no uncertain terms, that Drew McIntyre crossed a line. Not just a wrestling line, a personal line, a family line. And when Jimmy Uso talks about family, and I mean this, you listen differently than when most people in professional wrestling use that word. Because the Usos have actually lived it. They've had their family torn apart from the inside. They've had to choose between blood and manipulation, between love and loyalty used as a weapon. When Jimmy says, "That's my brother," the history behind those 4 words could fill a documentary. He also said something that sent chills down the spine of everyone paying attention, and I'm paraphrasing here, that Drew McIntyre should be very, very careful about what he started. Because the Usos don't forget. And they don't forgive easily. And when the time comes, when G is back on his feet, when that fire that Drew tried to extinguish comes roaring back to life, Drew McIntyre is going to wish he had shown some restraint. That's not just a promo. That is a promise. And here is where the story gets truly fascinating from a big picture perspective, because this attack doesn't exist in a vacuum. Everything in professional wrestling is connected. Drew McIntyre's motivations, his timing, his targets, nothing this man does is random. He picked Jey Uso for a reason. Because Jey Uso is beloved. Because attacking someone the fans rally behind this hard sends the loudest possible message. Because Drew McIntyre wants everyone, the locker room, the fans, management, everyone to understand that he operates on his own terms and answers to no one. But here's the thing about that strategy. Here's the thing about choosing Jey Uso as the symbol of your dominance. You also wake up Jimmy Uso. And you wake up an entire audience that is now personally invested in seeing Drew McIntyre get exactly what's coming to him. In professional wrestling, the best stories are the ones where the villain's greatest move also plants the seeds of their own downfall. Drew McIntyre just poured gasoline on a fire that was already burning hot. And somewhere, in that locker room, Jey Uso is getting back to his feet. Slowly, painfully, with that look in his eyes that we've seen before, that look that says, you should not have done that. And Jimmy Uso? Jimmy's not waiting for Smackdown. Jimmy's not waiting for a scheduled match or a sanctioned confrontation. Jimmy Uso is ready right now, and when a man who has been through everything the Usos have been through says he's ready, you believe him. The wrestling world erupted on social media following this moment, and rightfully so. Fans were divided, some genuinely shaken by how physical and realistic the attack looked, others absolutely buzzing with excitement about where this rivalry goes next. The comments sections across the wrestling community were flooded with takes, predictions, and emotional responses that reminded us all why we fell in love with this business in the first place. Wrestling, at its best, makes you feel like you're watching something that actually matters. And this moment? This moment had people talking the way only the truly great moments do. The debate has already started. Can Jey come back from this? Not physically, we know Jey Uso is built like a tank and will absolutely be back. But psychologically, competitively, can he come back from being made to look this vulnerable, in front of this many people? And the answer, if you know anything about Jey Uso's story arc, is not just yes. The answer is that this moment is precisely the kind of crucible that turns good wrestlers into legends. The moment of greatest darkness is always the setup for the most brilliant comeback. And we will be here when it happens. Before we wrap up, let's zoom out for just a second, because this is something Wrestling Impact always tries to do. We don't just look at the moment, we look at what the moment means. What Drew McIntyre did on SmackDown was violent, it was calculated, and it was brilliant in the most sinister possible way. He established himself as a threat of the highest order. He made a statement that nobody in that locker room can ignore. And he did it in a way that absolutely guarantees that the response from Jey and Jimmy Uso is going to be must-see television. What Jimmy's reaction told us is that the Bloodline's bond, even in its evolved, rebuilt form, is unbreakable. You go after one Uso, you answer to both. That's always been the deal. That will always be the deal. And Drew McIntyre, as smart and ruthless as he is, may have just made the single biggest tactical error of his SmackDown run. You don't poke a lion and then act surprised when it bites back. And the Usos? They don't bite back quietly. So here's where we leave it tonight, and I want you to sit with this. Somewhere on the road to the next SmackDown, these paths are going to cross again. Drew McIntyre is going to come out to that ramp, sword in hand, that cold smile on his face, absolutely convinced that he's broken something that cannot be fixed. And Jey Uso's music is going to hit. And that crowd is going to go from zero to absolute mayhem in about half a second. And Jey Uso is going to step through that curtain, and there won't be a word spoken. There won't need to be. Because everything that needs to be said was said the moment Drew McIntyre stood over him on that mat. And Jimmy Uso is going to be right there. Right behind his brother. Right where he should have been. That moment is coming. And when it does, Wrestling Impact is going to cover every single second of it. If you felt this one, if this story grabbed you the way the best wrestling stories always do, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps us bring you more content like this, and it lets us know that you're as invested in these stories as we are. Drop your reaction in the comments. I want to know, do you think Jey Uso comes back stronger after this, or did Drew McIntyre do real damage to his momentum? Sound off. I read every single one. And if you're not subscribed to Wrestling Impact yet, what are you doing? We are here every single week breaking down the moments that matter, telling the stories behind the stories, and giving you the deep dive wrestling coverage that the sport deserves. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and make sure you never miss a moment. Until next time, stay passionate, stay loud, and never stop believing in the power of professional wrestling. This is Wrestling Impact. We'll see you at ringside.n.